if I analyze how you are doing physics, I find that you get a result which is not consistent with what I get if I directly analyze the system that you are analyzing. So I kind of do two analyses. I first analyze the system of interest myself. This could be this experiment that your friend is doing. I just analyze it myself. And then I analyze how you are analyzing it. And I now check whether these two things are consistent. So one is kind of like a direct analysis, and the other is kind of via you. I just predict what you are going to predict. And now the prediction of what you are going to predict about the system should hopefully match what I'm directly predicting about the system. And that's a kind of consistency condition. And we first need to ask ourselves, what type of consistency conditions do we even require? Because we could just say, maybe we don't require anything. We already learned that quantum theory is kind of strange. So let's just not even assume, or let's not hope that there is any consistency there. And then there is no problem. So what we did in this work is to kind of have a kind of minimal consistency condition. And the minimal consistency condition is kind of that if you are so if I come to the conclusion using my analysis of your process of doing physics, so I analyze how you do the calculation and so on, and I come to the conclusion that your calculation will have the result that with absolute certainty the spin measurement will show that the spin is up. In that case, if I now directly analyze what the spin measurement should do, I should also come to the conclusion that it's up. Or I should at least not to the conclusion that with certainty it will be spin down. So that's kind of a minimal consistency. So it should never be the case that you are certain that the spin is up and I know that you're certain it's up, whereas I'm certain the spin is actually down. That would be a contradiction. And so what we are doing is to say, let's ask for this minimal consistency. Let's just say this should not be violated, this consistency condition.
Just a moment. I want to make it clear because people who are listening may think, well, if you flip a coin, okay, and you take a look at that coin, the coin says heads, that's in your head. Okay, so the heads is in your head. And then I'm thinking, okay, what is Professor Renner thinking? What's in his head? And obviously I have incomplete information, so I could say it's 50% heads, 50% tails. Obviously I can make a prediction and just say, I'm going to say it's tails. I was incorrect. But there's no inconsistency in the laws of physics there. So you're thinking about something that's extremely ideal and taking quantum theory, quote unquote, seriously. People like to use this term and seriously meaning, well, whatever it means. So there's something that's ultimate about it, that's final. There's no wiggle room here about just predictors and knowledge and so forth. But I need you to spell that out about the difference between just making an arbitrary prediction versus the ideal reasoner with ideal rationality or what have you, making a prediction.
Yes, I think this is a very important point to kind of make the distinction between uncertainty or incomplete knowledge or contradictory knowledge. So indeed, if I here flip a coin, and I could do that, I have one here, so I flip it, I have the outcome. And now I could say, I look at the outcome, so I have certain knowledge about this outcome, and I could now ask you, what's your knowledge about the outcome? And I guess you would say it's probably with 50% or 0.5 probability up, or heads, and with 0.5 tails. Now, this knowledge is not the same knowledge that I have, because I know for sure it's tails. I just saw it here. So that's, in that case, I would say you had incomplete knowledge, and this knowledge is not the same knowledge that I have. And that's, however, not a contradiction. Obviously, I mean, that would be very strange. So why is it not a contradiction? If I later tell you that it's actually tails, you would say this was perfectly consistent with you just not knowing whether it was heads or tails. But let's suppose you were actually, for some reason, because you probably analyzed the way this coin was flipped, you come to the conclusion that it's heads. You're absolutely certain it's heads, and you correctly applied the theory and everything. But I see it's tails. Then you would say there is somewhere a contradiction. And this is the type of contradiction we found in this thought experiment that we were analyzing. So it's really not just incomplete knowledge, it's contradictory knowledge. And contradictory knowledge, I would define it as there is no kind of additional information that I could give you that after the update would make you have the same knowledge. Because before in this thought experiment, I could have done that. I did it. I told you it's tails. And then you do a knowledge update, which is like you hear me telling it's tails and you say, okay, then you believe it's tails. So now you're also certain it's tails. So you just updated your knowledge and got to the same conclusion as I came. But if you were certain it's heads and I tell you, no, it's tails, then you cannot do an update. You will just run into a contradiction. When you try to apply Bayes' rule, you will basically divide by 0 and get nothing sensible out of that.
Okay, I like this classical analog. I think it makes it much more clear. So suppose the person listening can model the coin 100% accuracy. We're in classical mechanics, right. So we have no Heisenberg uncertainty. And then they calculate that the coin landed tails. And then you see it as landing heads, and you report to them, no, it actually landed heads. They would think I must have modeled it incorrectly. But you're saying, no. Let's assume you modeled it 100% correctly. Then, and we're going to get to your 3 criteria soon, but then you could say, well, either there's something wrong with me, which we've removed by your datum. You're saying like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You've used math correctly and classical mechanics correctly. Or there's something wrong with classical mechanics, or there's something wrong with so-and-so. There are a couple escape routes that you can take, which we'll get to. But this is the classical case. It's just to build some intuition for the quantum case.
Yes. I would completely agree with what you said. That's a very good summary of the type of contradiction, yes. So indeed, I mean, you mentioned, like, we assume it's very precisely that experiment and there is no error. And because we are, in a sense, talking about the thought experiment, we can just do this idealization. We can say, let's suppose all the agents that are involved, so I call these agents the different physicists, they just have a priori perfect information about the system. So let's say before the experiment actually starts, before I flip the coin, everyone gets the very same data about how the world is, what's the state. And then we start the experiment and I flip the coin and don't show you the outcome, but you calculate it and so on. But I can make these idealized assumptions in a thought experiment and then ask, does it come out well? Because at the end, it's a statement about the theory, not about the actual, let's say, experiment with flows. So I'm just telling you, if I feed into the theory all the information I have, what does it give me? And so by construction of the thought experiment, I give you the full information and the correct information about the world when the experiment starts.
Okay, would it be accurate to say that the classical analog would be something like, suppose Laplace's demon exists, then what if Laplace's demon is wrong in its prediction? Then you would say, well, how does that even make sense? If you're supposing Laplace's demon exists, almost by the criteria of it existing, of what Laplace's demon is, it has to be right. So would it be that you're doing something similar to that before the quantum case?
Yes, I would say this is another way to put it, the way you put it, but the question is, how would I define Laplace's demon? If I define it as it would really make the correct predictions, then this probably wouldn't make sense, because then by definition it's correct.
Yeah.
But if I define it to be a demon that applies the theory that we are trying to analyze absolutely correctly, then I think the analogy works. And that's what we are doing. So we are not assuming quantum theory is correct. We're just assuming all these agents are applying the theory perfectly. So it would be like a Laplace demon who is perfectly applying whatever theory it is that we want to test, let's say classical mechanics or classical theory. But I'm not demanding that this is actually the correct description of the world, because that's what we want to test. We kind of want to test whether the theory is a reasonable theory. So it's kind of a perfect demon in a sense with respect to the theory that we are testing.
The Economist covers math, physics, philosophy, and AI in a manner that shows how different countries perceive developments and how they impact markets. They recently published a piece on China's new neutrino detector. They cover extending life via mitochondrial transplants, creating an entirely new field of medicine. But it's also not just science. They analyze culture, they analyze finance, economics, business, international affairs across every region. I'm particularly liking their new insider feature. It was just launched this month. It gives me a front row access to The Economist's internal editorial debates, where senior editors argue through the news with world leaders and policymakers in twice weekly long format shows. Basically, an extremely high-quality podcast. Something else you should know about is that if you go to their app, they not only have daily articles, but they also have long-form podcasts with their editors and writers. This is also available online. Whether it's scientific innovation or shifting global politics, The Economist provides comprehensive coverage beyond headlines. As a TOE listener, you get a special discount. Head over to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for your discount.